following program is classified G. It's suitable for all ages.
Tonight, we discuss the current provisions within quarantine law in Sri Lanka. Multiple protests have arisen within the country which are attempting to hold authorities accountable for using safety as a cover to quash the protests. But it is this form of thinking that has contributed to multiple waves of the COVID-19 virus spreading within the country. The hard-working men and women on the front line have risked a lot to protect this country and its people, a point that has been re-emphasized when witnessing the pandemic response. Questions are present as to what the current measures are and exactly what powers are awarded to the authorities. Welcome to Law, Land and Liberty. This week we decided to take up a discussion that is contemporary, that has been within the platforms for quite some time, and that is the implementation and how the quarantine law is being carried out within Sri Lanka as of now. And to discuss this, we have the competent authority with us, an individual who has been with the media and would come here to explain exactly what is going on. A Senior DIG Ajith Rohana. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Before we move into the program, I want to give our viewers a basic breakdown as to how we are going to approach this topic. Firstly, we are going to talk about the evolution of pandemic law. Next, the quarantine law and its limitations. Thirdly, the enforcement of the law. And finally, emergency regulations.
Hello, my name is Mindula Gunawardena and I'm a law student. My question is about the evolution of pandemic law. How did pandemic law change from its initial production?
All right, let's move directly into the discussion. So our first question, since we are going to talk a bit about the evolution of pandemic law, primarily because people aren't clear as to what sometimes they would say they are not aware of what the rules are. So let's start from point A and then move on to exactly what is happening as of now. How exactly was the pandemic law, am I using that term correctly, is something you'll have to clarify, or quarantine law, the law as of now, how did it evolve to this extent, sir?
Yes, well, first of all, I am thankful to 24/7 channel for the invitation and to explain the existing legal concept in respect of pandemic law or the quarantine law, and because the Sri Lanka police is the main law enforcement agency in the country, even though we are facing with a pandemic situation, the health authorities, so they are dealing with all these health issues, but the implementation of pandemic law or the quarantine law enforced by the police. So therefore, being the police media spokesman and as an attorney at law, I can express our views, and apart from that, the legal provisions and implications. First pandemic had occurred in China 30,000 years ago, long years ago, and at the inception of human civilization, there were pandemics, but they didn't have laws because it was in the primitive period. Then thereafter, in the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries, the common pandemic of this world was plague. Generally, the rats are the carriers of that disease. So therefore, especially the countries in Europe, so they needed to create laws to deal with pandemic, because if your premises is clean, or if you don't have rubbish at home or the dwellings, so generally the population of rat or the rats are not spread. So therefore, initially, because of plague, the countries introduced several laws and regulations. But we are talking of our legal system. In 1897, the British rulers, they introduced our existing legal enactment called Quarantine and Prevention of Diseases Ordinance, Ordinance number 3 of 1897. According to this particular law, the minister has been empowered to make rules and regulations according to the variety of the virus or the pandemic. So therefore, since 1997, now it has already been completed 124 years. So time to time, the minister in charge of health has promulgated various laws. How he promulgate the law? Because in terms of the section 2 and 3, so this is the Quarantine and Prevention of Diseases Ordinance. In terms of the section
2 and 3,
the minister has been empowered to make regulations. So now, how this particular law developed? According to the statistics, in 1918 to 1919, there was a pandemic called a Spanish flu. So, according to the statistics, so that is the pandemic where the highest number of people passed away, died in the pandemic during the period or since the human civilization to date. However, in 1925, another pandemic was spread in Sri Lanka in respect of worms. Therefore, then Health Minister had promulgated a regulation, a comprehensive regulation in 1925.
It was the first instance, this worm infection issue.
Yes, worm infection. So therefore, so that it's a comprehensive regulation. So that regulation has been in existence for a period of almost 96 years now. The regulation that was promulgated by the minister,
this is based on the quarantine and prevention.
Contain whole required provisions. Okay. And COVID pandemic, the first COVID patient was found on the 27th of February 2020, a Chinese national woman, and first Sri Lankan was found on 11th of March 2020. So thereafter, for this COVID, the first Gazette notification was published by the Health Minister on the 18th of March. And again another Gazette notification 25th of March, and again 11th of April, and the existing law that is applicable for all these health habits is embodied in the Gazette notification published by the Minister of Health on the 15th of October 2020.
Okay. That is the most recent
yes.
update, yeah?
Yes.
Based on that, sir, if you could move into maybe the Gazette notification and explain to us now, at one point, as you said, we were at a premature stage, and now we have understood to a certain extent, we have faced things like dengue, maybe in the worm infestation. With the 2020 test in the Gazette notification on 15th of October 2020, what are the changes? What are the most important evolutionary steps that have been taken?
Yes, it's a very, very good question. The first COVID positive patient was found on the 11th of March 2020, as I mentioned. then the World Health Organization had published some gazette, some health habits, guidelines, rules. So according to that particular rules, they had emphasized that. So what are the preventive measures? Number one, everyone should wear a face mask. Everyone should wear a face mask. Then number two, the social distancing concept. 1 meter between two individuals. So number three, hand washing facility. Every and each institutions should provide hand washing facility at the entrance of that particular institution. So those are the other the important one is monitoring the body temperature. So the people should adhere with these health habits. The institutions, the supervisors, the owners, managers, so they need to carry out the guidelines given by the health. Then on one hand, so those are the guidelines and the things that we need to do. But on the other hand, if a person is failing to do it, so what is the remedy?
Exactly.
Nothing. Because when COVID pandemic was spread in Sri Lanka, the first COVID positive patient was found, we didn't have a law to deal with those issues because there was no law in respect of social distancing, face mask. The people moving here and there without face mask. So therefore, I mentioned a gazette notification that was published in 1925. In terms of the regulation 37, the proper authority can delegate his powers to any person, any institution, anybody, who the proper authority is. According to the gazette notification, the proper authority is for whole Sri Lanka, the Director General Health Services. Let's say it's a small locality or the area or the zone, then the MOH, the Medical Office of Health of that particular area. So they are the proper authorities or the mayors of municipal councils and the chairman of Pradeshiya Sabha, so they are also proper authority. So within their territory, they could conduct various activities, implement various activities according to the gazette notification.
Okay.
So the Director General Health Services delegated his powers to Inspector General of Police on the 18th of March 2020.
Okay.
18th of March 2020. So accordingly, we implemented quarantine curfew.
Okay.
We implemented quarantine curfew because 1925 Gazette notification states that the Director General Health Services can restrict the movements of persons. So he can say, so you are in a diseased locality, so therefore you should not go out, stay at home. It is legal. He can say. And if a person is disobeying his order,
the police will be.
Yes, according to the Gazette, so he should take action. But now he has delegated his powers to police, so therefore police could take action.
Okay.
So therefore we implemented quarantine curfew till the October 15 Gazette notification came.
Okay.
So October 15 Gazette notification we introduced, and the minister authorized it. We introduced especially the one basic thing. What's the public place? Public place. So I would like to read out that particular portion of the Gazette notification, because this is very, very important.
This is 2020, October 15.
October 15 Gazette notification. The public place is according to the Gazette.
Section, the first part of it.
Yes. The public place means any place to which the public have access, whether as a right or otherwise, whether on payment or not, whether on invitation or not. So therefore, if you go to a party on an invitation, if you are attending a wedding on an invitation, so you need to wear a face mask. You need to wear a face mask. It doesn't mean generally, under general law, public place includes a thoroughfare, a railway station, a bus stand, a train, a bus.
But that was amended by this.
Yeah. For this particular purpose,
okay,
we amended.
Okay.
And apart from that, we introduced everyone should wear a face mask. Mm-hmm. So once this Gazette notification is published, what happened? Then automatically it becomes as a quarantine order. Quarantine order.
Mm-hmm.
According to our penal code.
I want to give you some time on explaining quarantine law, and specifically give you a specific area for that, sir.
Right.
We'll take a very short break. You're with Law, Land and Liberty. Join us on our second segment.
Hello, my name is Sahan.
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in conversation with Senior DIG Ajith Rohana. Sir, I interrupted you before when you were continuing your discussion on what this quarantine law is. Now, when I started the program, we used this terminology of pandemic law, and that differentiation has become an issue because certain people, there's a confusion as to whether we are in an emergency period. If you can establish that and explain how we can understand the current status of law. Is it something different? Is it something like we had faced during the terrorist war that we were having? Is it that kind of period, or is it different to that?
It's a different type of law related to public health. Public health. Now, if we introduce emergency law, so it is threat to the national security, sovereignty, or the territorial integrity of a country. But here, we are implementing quarantine rules and regulations, laws, everything, because the pandemic is a threat to human lives.
Exactly.
So that is the reason. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if a Director General, if the Minister has published this type of Gazette notification, automatically it's a quarantine order. It's a quarantine order. In terms of the provisions of Section 264
of the Penal Code.
Of the Penal Code, if a person violates quarantine order, so he is liable for a punishment of 3 years. In addition to that, a fine.
what exactly is a quarantine order, sir? Is it something a minister gives out? How is a quarantine order defined?
Quarantine order, I will explain it.
Yeah.
So, and apart from that, in terms of the provisions of the Criminal Procedure Code, Schedule 1 of the Criminal Procedure Code, if a person has committed an offence under the section 264 of the Penal Code, a police officer can arrest that person without a warrant. So therefore, now since the inception of this Gazette notification, we have arrested approximately 53,000 persons since the 30th of October, because the Gazette was published on the 15th of October, but we gave a period of 2 weeks grace period to adjust with the situation, because the law became and no one haven't had any idea about this particular law. So therefore we gave a time period, and then thereafter we implemented law from 30th of October. So now we have arrested, and the Penal Code section 264 is the main section. The police has been empowered to arrest persons. So what is your next question?
Yeah, my next question, sir, I think it will connect really well with this. A criticism that you all have gotten is that quarantine is not a punishment, and that has been said all throughout, and that connects with the protest issue, and many people have been raising it.
So number one, I must tell you, everyone has right to express their views. Protest campaigns are the most colorful features of the democracy. Everyone say that, and we respect, because our constitution embodies those concepts that had been extracted from ICCPR, International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. So according to Article 14 of our constitution, the constitutional guarantees are there in respect of freedom of expression.
Yeah.
But I would like to read out the provisions of Article 15(2) of the Constitution. What is it? The exercise and operation of fundamental rights declared and recognized by Article 14(1)(a), which means
freedom of speech and expression.
Yeah. Shall be subjected to such restrictions as may be prescribed by law in the interest of racial and religious harmony, in relation to parliamentary privileges, contempt of court, defamation and incitement to an offence. Incitement to an offence. So I emphasize the term incitement to an offence. That is number one. Number two, Article 15(7) of the Constitution, which states, the exercise and operation of all fundamental rights declared in and recognized by Article 12, 13(1), 13(2) and 14 shall be subjected to such restrictions as may be prescribed by the law in interest of natural security, public order, protection of public health. So I emphasize the term protection of public health or morality, or for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for rights and freedoms of others. So therefore, the freedom of expression right is not an absolute right. It could be restricted in terms of the Article 15(2) of the Constitution, and especially Article 15(7) of the Constitution. So therefore, if there is a health threat or imminent threat, if the Director General Health Services has published a notice in respect of the threat, then police have been empowered to implement the quarantine law. So what is police duty? What should we do? So accordingly, in the recent past, so everyone was questioning about this document. This document was issued by the Director General Health Services on the 6th of July 2021. So I would like to read out what he said in the original language.
Okay.
පොලිස්පති පොලිස් මූලස්ථානයේ කොළඹ 1 2021 7 My number, it means the DG's number. DDG PHS 1 DO 2 7 13 2013 20. මහජනතාව වැඩි වශයෙන් ඒකරාශී වන පොදු රැස්වීම් උද්ඝෝෂණ වැනි ක්‍රියාකාරකම් සිදු කිරීම මගින් කොවිඩ් රෝගය පැතිර යාමේ විශාල අවදානමක් පවතී. එබැවින් එවැනි ආකාරයේ මහජනතාව විශාල වශයෙන් ඒකරාශී වන පොදු රැස්වීම උද්ඝෝෂණ පැවැත්වීම නැවත දැනුම් දෙනතුරු සිදු නොකළ යුතු බව දන්වා සිටිමි. අසේල ගුණවර්ධන සෞඛ්‍ය සේවා අධ්‍යක්ෂ ජනරාල් නිසි බලධාරියා. So this is the original letter because I explained to you in the original language.
Yeah.
So what he said is the protest campaigns or the public approach are threat to the COVID-19, I mean the prevention of COVID-19. So therefore, police have been informed to take appropriate action. Is it a quarantine order? So people are questioning whether this particular notice is a quarantine order. Yes, because this is the Gazette. So, according to the Gazette notification, section 98 of the Gazette, it says where the restriction of movement is lifted. Now, we are in the situation where restriction of movement
have been lifted. Yeah.
By the proposed authority in any disease locality in relation to coronavirus, every person who enters public place or any other place where such place may come into close contact with another person, arranges or organizes meeting, seminar or any other similar gathering or obtains all services including essential service shall comply such other disease preventive measures may be determined from time to time by the proper authority. Time to time. Now the Gazette notification says that there are rules and regulations that are embodied in the Gazette notification from 1 to 97. But apart from that, section 98 says that time to time, apart from the minister has declared the rules and regulations, apart from that, the proper authority can
make a declaration.
So therefore, this is also a part of
Quarantine order.
that particular quarantine law. If a person has violated this particular quarantine order, again he has committed an offence under the penal code. Then the other thing is, in terms of the provisions of Article 15(7) of the Constitution, you cannot deprive others' rights.
Exactly.
Others' rights. So what are the others' rights? Now, if a person is blocking the road, if the other vehicle movements are restricted, if the general public are not able to move through that particular road, so others' rights are deprived. So I have a right to live, but if these protest campaigns are conducted against the COVID-19 rules, guidelines, regulations, if the social distancing concept is not respected, what happened?
Spread of the...
It's spread. So therefore, we were compelled to take precautionary actions. We were taking. But one thing I should clarify. What is it? Now, in the recent past, there were instances. The people have been ordered to follow quarantine procedures at their homes. Who ordered? The MOH or the delegated officer of health sector.
Okay.
Or some persons have ordered to follow quarantine procedures at government established quarantine centers.
Okay.
And they have been carried to those centers. So when...
That is this issue of punishment that has come.
Yes, carried to those centers when there was a resistance. By using force, police carried them to quarantine
centers.
So
I want to, like our next segment, as in you worked really well to that end of what the authorities' rights and the powers that are there. We'll just talk about that within our next segment, sir. Before that, let's take a look at the daily happenings in the legal field within this country. Here's a look at the law in the land.
Good evening, I'm Suzanne Shanali. Let's take a look as to how the law has worked in our land. The Criminal Investigations Department questioned Samagijana Balavege, a Member of Parliament Harin Fernando, over a controversial statement he made on the April 2019 Easter Sunday terror attacks. The Member of the Parliament left the CID premises after recording a statement for nearly 5 hours on the 28th of July. The CID has launched an investigation into the comments made by the SJB parliamentarian on the 2019 Easter Sunday bombings. The Attorney General informed the Supreme Court that further amendments will be made to the government's financial amendment bill. The relevant petitions were taken up before a 3-judge bench of the Supreme Court. On the 29th of July, the Supreme Court concluded hearing the petitions and announced that the order is to be notified to the Speaker of the Parliament in the near future. Former MP Hirunika Premachandra has filed a fundamental rights petition in the Supreme Court seeking a declaration that the presidential pardon given to former MP Duminda Silva is unconstitutional. In her petition, Hirunika Premachandra had named the Attorney General, Commissioner General of Prisons, the Minister of Justice and several others as respondents. Avantgarde Chairman Nisanka Yapa Senadipati and Rakna Lanka Security Company's former chairman, retired Major General Palita Fernando, were acquitted from the Avantgarde bribery case by the Colombo High Court. Bribery Commission's Assistant Director General appearing for the Bribery Commissions informed that the court that he commission had decided to withdraw the case due to technical glitches in the case. SJB MP Patali Champika Ranawaka presented a private member's bill to Parliament aimed at codifying a contempt of court law for the country. The Contempt of Court Bill seeks to define and limit the powers of certain courts in imposing punishment in contempt of court cases and to regulate their procedure in dealing with contempt cases. That was a look at the major events of how the law has worked in our land. I'm Suzanne Shanali. We'll now go into a short commercial break. Ganindu will be back after the break.
And I'm a law student. My question is about the enforcement of the law. So what are the powers awarded to the authorities during quarantine?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in conversation with Senior DIG Ajith Rohana. Sir, our next question, and you really moved well into that, you gave a proper segue about the issue that has come up is what rights, what privileges, what powers the authorities have, and who are the authorities that are empowered in this instance. You touched on it in multiple scenarios, mentioning these are the authorities. Now, this question arises from the fact that quarantine, again, is not a punishment. It's a preventive measure that has been taken. How do you respond to that, sir?
Well, the police cannot make any order in respect of quarantine procedures. So we cannot say that the police or the armed forces or any other member, though we have been delegated powers, we cannot say, so you must follow 14-day quarantine procedure here at your home. No, we cannot say. So we cannot say, you should not stay at home because you are a close contact. So we inform you to follow quarantine procedures at a compulsory quarantine center. So the army or police will come to your place. So get ready. Get ready. In 3 hours time or 6 hours time, you will be carried to a quarantine center. So those orders are issued by the health authorities. We don't have any power to inform any person or group of person to follow quarantine procedures. And the other thing is no choices at all. It means, okay, home quarantine, self-quarantine, quarantine center. No, we don't have such powers. But in the recent past, there were instances, the MOH officers or their delegated officers, they had issued quarantine orders in respect of persons. And they decided, I don't know what criteria they are using, so sometimes, let's say, now you are a contact, but not a close contact, you are in the third ring. So I am a COVID positive patient, so now if I am tested, positive, so you are a close contact. But you go home and your home people are there, so they are not, directly contacted me. Then they might be third ring or second ring. So therefore, sometimes the health authorities inform you to follow quarantine procedures at a quarantine center. So your contacts might be quarantined at the residence. So likewise, it is a sole responsibility of health authorities. But once they issued that order, and if they seek our support and cooperation, we need to help him. We need to assist them. Otherwise, we are liable for an offence, according to the provisions of police ordinance. So therefore, the people talking of, the way police carried persons into buses or to quarantine centers. Now, tell me, you have been asked to go to Vaunia quarantine center, and I have come to carry you with bus. You are reluctant to go. You say that, no, I can't go. Then, being a police officer, what should I do? Okay. You stay at home, don't worry, you go. Is it the concept or the norm that the law expects? Then, you have stolen something, so I am going to your place. You say, no, you can't check. Go back. So then,
you'll have to leave.
I have to leave the place.
But
so we are paid by the general public of this country, taxpayers, and our salaries are paid by the general public. So therefore, why they paid for us to perform duties? So if we are failing in our duties, so what happened?
The larger society is affected by this.
On one hand, there might be security issues, but on the other hand, there might be health issues.
Exactly. So, before we go into the next break, I want to just touch on this now. You were very clear when you mentioned it was the health authorities that dictate what should happen and then you all enforce it. That is the authority there. Can quarantine, either by the courts, since you are also an attorney at law, I think you can answer this, either by the courts or any other authority, can it be given as a punishment? Is that a possibility? Is that given in the law somewhere?
Under any circumstances, any law, quarantine procedures are not a punishment. Okay. It's a health concept. In order to follow quarantine rules and regulations, because to prevent the spreading of that particular disease. That's all.
All right. So now this protest issue, it comes with the general criticism that is always put forward to the authorities, and now certain gatherings are allowed. And then that comparison is made there, okay, these gatherings are allowed, this gathering is not. Is it because it's politically motivated? How does that differentiation happen? If you can just, as of now, how does the law permit, what are the gatherings that are possible?
Weddings are allowed. Funerals are allowed with limited numbers. And seminars, workshops are allowed for 50 persons. But all the time, let's say there is a wedding, the maximum 150, that is maximum, but let's say now this particular room, the capacity is 50, so you cannot put 150, 1/4, which means
the original
maximum 12 here. But if it is a bigger hall, a very big hall with the capacity of 1,000, they cannot have 250, 1/4.
Maximum is 100.
Maximum 150. When the weddings are conducted, the hotel owners or the banquet hall owners, so they have a liability and responsibility. What do they do? The PHI comes there. At the entrance, there is hand washing facility. Then body temperature is monitored. The tables, chairs, the arrangements according to the social distancing concept. Time to time, body temperature is monitored. Okay? If it is a wedding. If it is a workshop, the same concept is adopted. But if it is a protest campaign, is there a hand washing facility? So is there a person to monitor body temperature of the all persons? Is there a PHI there? Then what happened?
True.
So then we can differentiate
both events.
That's
a very good explanation given there. So we'll take a very short break here with Law, Land and Liberty. Stay with us once we go into our last segment.
And I'm an international relations student, and my question is on emergency regulations in Sri Lanka. What are the key emergency regulations in place within Sri Lanka today?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in conversation with Senior DIG Ajith Rohana. Within our last segment, so my question is going to be a bit about the emergency regulations, and because people are not clear, and you explained this also, when the COVID pandemic came, we were not sure about what was going on. It was a novel experience for both parties. Now, questions arise as to, in general, what the emergency regulations are. If you can address that also, and in addition, so if you could mention now, if someone doesn't wear a mask, and if the authorities do take the decision to quarantine or to limit the person's movement, isn't that some form of punishment, or how does penalties work in these days?
Yes. If a person is found without a face mask in public place, he could be arrested by the police, and police could produce that particular person before the magistrate, or police officer in charge of the police station can grant bail at the police station, or he will be produced before the magistrate, or otherwise we can make a request to court to be remanded that particular person. So those are the options. And if that particular person is found guilty of the charge, so the court can impose 6 months rigorous imprisonment and a fine fine or both punishments. So this is the law legal scenario according to the offences or according to the law. And in addition to that, what is your next question?
My question, sir, now when we refer to many things that you have been speaking about, also you reference things like the Factories Act, the Public Securities Ordinance, I think you mentioned that here as well.
Yes.
There are a number of laws that are affecting emergency regulations and the period we are in right now. How can someone get a general understanding of this? Where should we go to? Is it just the Gazette notification that we should follow and whatever that comes out of the DIG of the health services, or is there any other authority that we should be following?
Time to time, in terms of the section 98 of the Gazette notification of October 15, Director General Health Services publicized Gazette notifications. So generally, he publishes Gazette notifications all the time, and people should follow it, especially the owners of the institutions, the heads of the government departments, state sector, private sector. All the Gazette all the health notifications or the COVID guidelines are in the website of Health Ministry. In addition to that, once a health guideline issued by the Director General Health Services, so like Derana, other Derana, so your websites carry that news. Then they can access to your website and get ideas, information. So once it is published, it becomes a quarantine order, and if a person violates that quarantine order, then punishment could be imposed. And one final thing what I need to emphasize is, you asked about emergency regulation. What emergency regulation is? In 1947, the British rulers, they enacted a legislation called Public Security Ordinance. Public Security Ordinance. Especially those days, 1947 means 75 years ago, countries were facing with exigency situations in respect of a threat to national security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. So therefore, various rebel groups fought against the government's crown. So they introduced this particular law. So according to that law, the president of the country, so those days the king or the governor, could promulgate a special regulations. So those regulations supersedes the normal law. For instance, under the normal law, we can keep a suspect for a period of 24 hours or for certain offences 48 hours. But under the emergency law, sometimes we can detain a suspect at the police station for a period of 90 days. Okay. We can acquire building. We can acquire vehicles. So likewise, to deal with issues in respect of terrorism, or nowadays extremism, His Excellency the President can promulgate rules and regulations in terms of the provisions of Public Security Ordinance. So those are called emergency regulations. But emergency regulations are ad hoc clause. Time to time it is changed and it is terminated, and monthly the Parliament should approve emergency regulation. If it is not approved, so generally the operation of emergency regulation is terminated.
All right. That is a lot of content that you have given us, a lot of things that were clarified. That unfortunately, that is the time we have for today. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us and giving us this time. Senior DIG Ajith Rohana, our guest for today. All right, in conclusion, as was discussed within today's discussion, the regulations present today against mass gatherings are to protect you and me, because the country is currently fighting a pandemic. We must not lose sight of that target. One of the most widely acclaimed quotes of a country's leader responding to a protest was when Lee Kuan Yew, considered to be the founding father of modern Singapore, stopped the Singapore Airlines pilots from undertaking an illegal work-to-rule industrial action. He famously addressed the protesters to get back to work, restore discipline, then argue your case. This is not a game of cards. This is your life and mine. A strong sentiment to tell the people of a country that intimidatory protests don't contribute to a country's development, but rather to its collapse. A message that is important to those not considering the pandemic situation within Sri Lanka. That is all from us here at Law, Land and Liberty. Join us again next week as we bring to you another contemporary legal issue and provide a breakdown. I'm Danidithanawasam. Have a great night.